Hi, this is Robin Hood of Sherwood Forest by Ann McGovern, Chapter 10. How Robin Hood is Pardoned. For 40 days, Robin Hood and his men were free to roam the length and breadth of England, as King Henry had promised. Then came the 41st day, and the 42nd, and in all the days that followed, they were free. For the Sheriff of Nottingham, though he tried every trick he knew, still could not capture Robin or any of his men. As the years passed, stories of their daring deeds spread far and wide, until there was hardly a soul in all of England who had not heard of Robin Hood and his merry band of outlaws. In the meanwhile, King Henry died, and King Richard took the throne. So brave a fighter was this new king that he became known to all as Richard the Lion-Hearted. As he was so often called out of the country to fight for England, few knew him well, though tales of his courage were told throughout the land. After many years spent fighting in the Holy Land, King Richard returned to England, vowing to make a tour of his kingdom, the better to know his subjects. Tales of Robin Hood that reached his ears were so wondrous that especially did he wish to visit that part of England where the outlaw dwelt. He thought it best to disguise himself and his party so none would know them. And so it happened that one afternoon, the Sheriff of Nottingham, seated comfortably before a roaring fire in his great house, was told that a company of friars from a far-off land wished his audience. Now, the sheriff was sorely vexed that day, for his latest plan to capture Robin Hood had failed dismally, and so he was low-spirited and short of patience, and had no wish to be disturbed. "Only for a few minutes will I see them," grumbled the sheriff, "and if I like not their speech, I shall soon send them on their way." 7 men were shown into the great hall. One friar, taller and broader than the others, his face hidden beneath his hood, greeted the sheriff most courteously, saying, "Forgive us this interruption, but tales of your generosity are known to us. We have traveled a long distance and have need of rest and some food and drink. More important matters have I than to become an innkeeper for every man who passes my door," the sheriff grumbled. "If it's food and drink you want, go pray for it. Or better still," and now he chuckled grimly, "get thee hence to Sherwood Forest. You can be sure of a meal there for a goodly price." "Sherwood Forest," exclaimed the tall friar. "But is that not the home of Robin Hood?" "Aye," said the sheriff darkly, "and there is none living more evil than that robber. But I have heard tales of his courage and valor, and of how he has helped hundreds of poor, deserving folk," the friar insisted. "Ha!" growled the sheriff. "Take your tales to the king. As for myself, I know what I know, and this I know full well. If you have any gold hidden in your cloaks, and if you keep traveling west till you reach the woods at the edge of Nottingham town, you will find robbers aplenty who will quickly rid you of your last coin. Go beg a meal of them. I want no more of you. Be gone." So the holy men took their leave, and the tallest one vowed he would long remember how badly he had been received by the Sheriff of Nottingham. Mounting their steeds, they proceeded westerly, and any who passed thought nothing of what they saw, except that these were a band of friars, bound for some mission or other. When they were deep in the woods, the tall friar drew his steed to a halt and said to the others, "I bid you stay hidden among the trees till I summon you with a whistle." At that the others protested, saying that their only reason for being was to protect his life. But the friar was not to be persuaded. "Good fellows," he said, "trust me. I think it best I go alone." So the lone friar went deeper and deeper into the woods, looking neither to the right nor the left, but keeping his eyes straight ahead without fear. Of a sudden he heard the snapping of twigs, and out from behind a thick bush peered the merriest face the friar had ever looked upon. In a moment the stranger burst forth from the bush and stepped in front of the friar's horse. Taking hold of his reins, he said with a twinkle in his eye, "Hold, good brother, tell me thy business in this forest, for it is not often that a stranger passes by these parts without purpose." "I have lost my way," the friar said, "and I am in need of food and drink, for far have I traveled this day. But I fear these woods, for I have been told that they are the home of the villainous robber Robin Hood." The stranger dropped the reins and said with a scowl, "Food and drink can I provide you with, but not before you take back the cowardly words. I know Robin Hood better than any man living, and I know him not to be what you call him. Gladly will I take arms against you to defend his honor." The friar laughed, but kept his mount. "Forsooth, erase your frown. I like you better with a smile. As for my words, gladly will I forget them. They are nothing more than the echo of the Sheriff of Nottingham, who recently turned me from his door." At this the yeoman said, laughing, "If you be enemy of the sheriff, then you be friend of mine." And taking a bugle from under his cloak, he lifted it to his lips, blowing 3 sturdy notes. In an instant there came running 20 bold men, dressed in Lincoln green, their bows drawn tight. "No need for shooting yet," laughed Robin Hood, for, indeed, it was he. "This friar I chanced upon spoke none too well of me, so I would give him 3 hours to sing a different tune. He also desires food and drink, and since we set a festive table, let him pay dearly for his appetite." And turning to the friar, Robin said, "Show me the weight of thy purse." "Pray, good sir," said the friar, "have you no charity for a man dressed in holy garb?" Robin laughed again and said, "Rich friars such as yourself get their wealth from poor gentlefolk. We lead a simple life in the greenwood, and are beholden to no man. Furthermore, we can put your gold to better use than ever you can. Drop your purse, or my men will strip thee of thy frock to find it." the band of outlaws took a step closer to where the friar sat upon his horse. Then, with a shrug of his broad shoulders, the friar dropped his purse. "Count the contents of it," Robin said, "to see what kind of feast we shall bestow upon our guest." Will Stutely and Allan a Dale quickly counted the coins. £100, good master," said Will. "With so much gold we will not only feast you like a king, but entertain you as well," said Robin. "Give him back half his gold. Let him not say that Robin Hood is greedy." And turning to the friar, he said, "Pull back your hood, so I can see what manner of man you are." "Nay, that I cannot do," answered the friar, "for I have made holy vows not to show my face for 24 hours. "Then tell me your name," said Robin Hood kindly, for he had taken an immediate liking to this tall friar. "Men call me by many names, but you may call me Father Richard," the friar said gently. "Richard?" asked Robin. "You bear a kingly name, one that is truly honored by me and my men. Huzzah, then, for this Richard, and for our beloved king, Richard the Lion-hearted." Whereupon the merry men gave such hearty cheers that the friar could not help but smile. Then, with some leading and some following, the friar had a jolly escort to the greenwood home of Robin Hood and his men. There the friar looked upon a goodly sight, as 100 men and more bustled to and fro, involved in cheerful occupation, all without apparent command. Some were lighting great fires, others turning venison and juicy fowl upon the spits. Wood was gathered and chopped, fruit was picked, washed, and laid upon the table. Not a man was idle. The friar looked with approval at all he saw. Then, turning to Allan a Dale, he said in a low voice, "Never have I seen men work so well or so willingly. Is this truly the rough, villainous band of outlaws I have heard so much about? If there is a secret to it, I pray, tell me." Allan looked thoughtful. After a long pause, he said, "I know no secret, and while I have not pondered upon the question before, I see why you do wonder. It's a hard life we live here, though some would disagree, and if we did not work together, we would not survive. Also, it is our leader, Robin Hood himself, I think. Since no man is forced into this life, and each man here trusts and loves him so well, all his rules are followed willingly." The friar nodded and thought to himself, "I doubt that even the king could command more loyalty from his men than does Robin from his." Then the friar went up to Robin and said, "I have a boon to ask of thee. 6 of my party are hidden in the woods outside the glade. I think by now they are near starving." "Say no more," said Robin. £50 would feed 50 men. And he called a score of men about him, and bade them bring the friar's friends hither. Soon afterward, the 6 men rode into the clearing, and when they were assured that no harm had befallen the tall friar, they joined the outlaws in preparation for the feast. And such a feast it was. There was pheasant and fish, roast goose and venison, and freshly baked bread for all. Great tankards of ale were passed back and forth, and the friars in brown ate and drank as heartily and with as much merriment as the men in green. Then Robin called for the fires to be made higher, the better to see the entertainment that was to follow. The friar saw stout wrestling matches and bouts of quarterstaff, the likes of which he had never before witnessed, and loud were the cheers for each display of skill. I think the king himself would be pleased to have in service the 100 bold men I see here this day, said the friar to Robin Hood. Good monk, said Robin Hood, there is not a man here in Sherwood Forest who would not willingly let the last drop of blood flow from his body for such a just and honest king as Richard the Lion-Hearted. I think the king would be somewhat surprised to hear such words from the mouth of England's most famous outlaw, laughed the friar. But, surprised or not, most certain would be his pleasure to see your men shoot their arrows, for in truth there is not a man in England who has not heard of the wondrous skill at that sport. Then Robin issued a command for the marks to be set up, and straightway the men ran to do their master's bidding. 2 garlands of leaves were placed upon the trees, 100 paces distant, so far that the friar had to peer closely to see them. Robin explained the rules of their sport. Each man shoots 3 arrows. If any man misses any of his arrows, then he shall receive a buffet from the mighty hand of Friar Tuck. First to shoot was Midge, the miller's son, and all 3 of his arrows shot straight through. Then came Little John, and after him Will Stutely, and both men shot full fair, to the resounding cheers of the friar and his men. Then up came Allan a Dale, and, alas, one of his arrows missed the mark by a hair. "A buffet! A buffet!" roared the men, and the tall friar marveled at the good grace of all. Then Allan a Dale stood before Friar Tuck and said, "Strike away, Tuck, but remember how you love my singing. Save my voice, at least." Friar Tuck rolled up his sleeve to expose an arm bulging with might and main. He swung and, whack, struck Allan's head with the palm of his hand. Down went Allan a Dale, rolling and sprawling on the ground, and it was many a minute before he could sit up straight. The outlaw band roared with laughter, and the friar laughed so hard that tears fell from his eyes. Then the rest of the band shot in turn, and while most escaped the buffeting, some felt the force of Friar Tuck's hand. "I see that your men have all the skill that is sung in ballads," said the tall stranger. "It only remains for you to shoot." Robin took his place, and all were still as he shot his first arrow, and then his next, which lodged on the mark no more than a fraction of an inch from the first. Then Robin fit his third arrow to his bow, and lo, it was badly feathered, and missed the mark by an inch. Never before had the men seen their master miss a mark, and loud was their laughter. But Robin was vexed, and said, "Give me 5 more arrows, and I will shoot each one without fault. That arrow had a crooked feather, and 'tis not fair to give me the buffeting." "Ah, but it was you who made the rules," said the tall friar, and all about shouted that this was so. "Very well," said Robin, "but since my missing any mark is rare, let the one who doles out the punishment be rare as well." "Good brother," he said to the friar, "let your holy hand give me my blow." And without a word, as all sat hushed about the fires, as silent as snow, the tall friar extended his arm, and fetched Robin such a stunning blow that all who saw it gasped in wonder. As for Robin, he was thrown some yards distant onto the ground, and it was a full 3 minutes before he could open his eyes. When he did, he saw as handsome and as strong a face as ever he beheld, for while smiting the blow, the hood had fallen from the friar's face. Robin shook his head. Had the blow caused him to lose his senses? Surely this was no churchman. Then from here and there came a murmur, a shout, a roar. "The king! The king! It's Richard the Lion-Hearted!" And with that each man there fell to his knees before the king. After a moment the king said, "Arise, good fellows, and have no fear." "Mercy!" cried Friar Tuck, and soft were the echoes as all called for mercy. Then did the king look stern, and he summoned Robin Hood to stand before him. "You and your men are in no danger. It's true you are outlaws, and 'tis true you kill the deer that by rights belong to me. But haven't you feasted the king on his very own food? And haven't you shown me greater kindness this day than did the sheriff of Nottingham? Right pleased am I to see such a band of goodly men. And now, to test the truth of what you have said no more than an hour ago, that every last man of you would willingly die for the king." "The king! The king!" shouted all the merry men. "Long live the king!" "You have heard the truth," said Robin Hood humbly, and he bowed low to kiss the hem of the king's cloak. "Then I give you all pardon from this day hence," said the king. And so great were the cheers that followed that even the birds awoke to sing along. Robin cried out, "I swear to you that every man in Lincoln Green stands ready to do your bidding." The king looked at Robin's face and was silent a moment. Then he said, "Let you and 60 of your stoutest men come with me to London town to give your service to me. Let the rest stay here in Sherwood forest, no longer to pull their bows against my deer, but to protect them in the king's name. Pick one of your choosing, Robin Hood, who is wise of head and fair of heart, for he shall take the sheriff of Nottingham's place this day." Cheer followed cheer until each man could shout no more. As the sun began to wane and shadows crept over Sherwood Forest, Allan a Dale sang one last song, which seemed to come from heaven itself, so full of beauty it was. For it told of the life they had known and loved so well. Robin Hood moved quietly to the king's side and whispered, "Gladly will I leave Sherwood Forest to serve thee, but grant me one boon, if it pleases you." "Tell me of it," said the king. "Will you give me leave, some day when I grow old, to come back to these beloved woods?" "Yes, and more will I give you," answered the king. "You have only to tell me that life in London town is not to your liking, and you may return here." And so we come to the end of our tale of Robin Hood in Sherwood Forest. As for the days and years that followed, who can rightly say? For some think Robin was happy in the king's service, and others say he yearned for Sherwood. Some say that on nights when the moon is round, 3 clear notes can be heard echoing from the greenwood. What do you say, dear reader? The end.